Well, it's Thursday, it's 5, and we're live. Hi, I'm Joe Spina, along with Paul Crowley, where truth is our mission, reality our realm, set as we see it, and frankly as well, Paul. Huh? Not bad.
I love how you pull that off every week, and I tell you, if I was trying to do that, I would blow it every single week. So you impress me every time you pull that off.
We got to do some a little announcements out here, because apparently the finalists for the superintendent of schools is going to happen next week on Monday, and they're going to be live. They can watch it live here on.
This is going to be like The Apprentice.
Well, they have 3 people that are going to be interviewed. It says the interview for the position of superintendent of Lynn schools will be broadcast live.
That's foolish.
On the government channels.
I don't like that. Is that fair to the candidates?
That's an interesting point. Let me read this out.
It's a little bizarre.
You got a point there. So on Monday, May 7th, and Tuesday, May 8th, starting at 6 p.m., and immediately following the interviews on May 8th, we will broadcast, meaning LCTV, the council meeting, which begins at 8 o'clock. Now, the 3 finalists, and I don't know if I can say their names, Dr. Jessica Huzenga, I think that's how I say it, and then there's a Dr. Maurice Eduardo-Vincent, and Dr. Patrick Tedweiler. So I don't qualify because I'm not a doctor. Now, folks, these are doctors of education, you know what I mean? They don't pull teeth and they don't do tonsillectomies.
Right. They just go to school, get a lot of degrees.
Right.
Yeah.
And probably the easiest doctorate in the world to get is in education.
Be that as it may, they are. It sounds like we have 3 pretty solid candidates, and all from outside the city. It's apparently, huh?
I have no idea, and I wish them the best.
You don't recognize any of the names?
No, I didn't recognize the one either, but we'll try to get more information. Speaking of which, let me know up there on the screen, if you will, is this the Friday that they have the classic motion pictures in studio? I believe it is. If so, let me know. Anyway, you know Leslie Gould at all?
I know who she is, sure. She runs the Chamber of Commerce.
Yeah, well, you guess what? She's going to be leaving. She's been there for 10 years. And Leslie is going over to, there she is, she's going over to the Greater Beverly Chamber of Commerce as the executive director. And what I like in her parting, she said this, Paul. She said, I love where Lynn is going, and I'm proud of what we accomplished in the 10 years I've been here. It's not the same chamber I walked into. I can leave knowing it's in a healthy position on all fronts. So everybody here at LCTV wishes Leslie the best on the new endeavors.
Yeah, I think all the power to her. You know, she came in at a time when there was some financial challenges there, and she certainly turned it around. She did it with a lot of enthusiasm. She was always very enthusiastic, for sure. Well, very bubbly personality.
She was over at the Chamber of Commerce in Marblehead prior to coming to Lynn, and she was named Woman CEO of the Year, I believe, by the Lynn Lions. So she's a very active lady. I mean, she went to BU. I don't know much about her, but everything I heard is that she's a really top flight lady.
Yeah.
So the best to you, Leslie. Frankly, Joe, what are you? Are you a conservative? Are you a liberal, Democrat, Republican, independent? Or are you a socialist, communist, libertarian, anarchist, progressive? Confused? Labels don't tell the story. Pigeonholing someone as right or left is dichotomous and polarizing, when in reality most of us are composites. The media proclaims America paralyzed by a blood and Crips political mentality of us versus them, while on the sidelines, a small cadre of puppeteers giggle as they pull the strings and dine on nectar. What does this all have to do with Lynn? Well, everything, if you think about it. Our number here is 781-780-9460. So, Paulie, what do you think of that?
So, you're right. I mean, there's just no way that anybody can be truly one of those descriptors. You can't just be conservative. For example, I am fiscally conservative but socially liberal, right? If you go back in time, the liberal, the concept of liberalism was a conservative kind of attitude. It was
Well,
it was
we're gonna
interpreted
get
very.
into-
So the word changed its meaning, and you know, what happens is that the politicians, they co-opt these words
Sure.
for their own use. It's like progressive, right? Somebody accused me, not accused me,
Labeled you?
labeled me. This was in an email introduction to somebody recently. He described me as the most progressive member of my trade association.
Okay.
But would you consider me, quote, progressive in the political sense?
Well, that's what we're going to get into. We're going to get into the mislabeling and the misunderstanding, and so that we can do some clarity, because that's done by design, Paul.
It
It's done in
absolutely
order for the minority. Remember those organized minority folks?
Yep.
You know, controlling the majority. So let's get up with conservatism versus liberalism. Here's a couple of key points, Paul. Liberalism is distinct from conservatism, but they join together because they both cannot stand the collective state. They're both anti-socialist, anti-totalitarian. You got it?
Yep.
All right. Liberals warn us that socialism and planned societies ultimately destroy liberty. That's why you call yourself a libertarian.
Right.
Okay?
Versus a liberal.
Exactly.
Right.
Fascism and communism are merely variants of the same totalitarianism, with central control of all economic activities tend to produce. And that liberals recognize as for human liberties, there is little to choose between communism, socialism, or national socialism, which is basically fascism, because all of them threaten individual choice and personal liberty.
Right. And what both organized minorities at the federal level, you know, so let's call them the Democrats and the Republicans, both of them are an organized minority, and they both accuse the other one of being dangerously close to being fascist or communist, and that's how they...
And ultimately, what we call a liberal in the United States today is fundamentally going to move us toward control, manage society, and affect totalitarianism, so they're the opposite of being liberal.
Right.
They are not liberal. They call themselves liberal, but they're not, Paul.
Right.
They're going to bring us to, and we're going to get into that. What is a conservative, Paul? You and I always been accused of being conservatives,
right,
whatever that means.
Right, and by the way, I mean, when you describe it as being accused, I laugh because while some people would never want to be accused of being a conservative, oh no, please don't let anybody find out that I'm conservative, I wear that proudly on my chest. Nobody is ever going to be in doubt of my conservative values.
After I read you what a conservative is, you're going to change stripes, like I did.
No, but wait a minute.
Yeah?
Right. So conservative, the way it's described today, all right, and it's fiscal conservative. And if you think about conservative, it means to conserve.
That's right.
Environmentalists are more conservative of nature, but I am not an environmentalist. So, you know, there's a whole... and I know where you're going with this.
It is fascinating. I never hear, by the way, is 781-780-9460. And you folks have to pine in anytime you like. I don't know whether we could do on telephone tonight, but we'll find out. What is a conservative? Well, I'm going to go according to F.A. Hyatt, who wrote a book called The Road to Serfdom. In 1940, Paul, this is just before the really big outbreak of World War. It happened in 1939, right, but it really didn't get cold for a while. And here's what he had to say. He said, conservatism is a necessary element in any stable society. However, it is not a social program. So people mix up. It's, you know, conservatism is not about social issues. That's number one, which is a misunderstanding people have. It is paternalistic, it's nationalistic, and power-adoring tendencies. It is closer, listen to this, to socialism than liberalism. So conservatism is closer to socialism than liberalism. What is, with its traditionalistic and anti-intellectual, often mystical propensities, it will never, this is Hyatt speaking now, except for short periods of disillusionment, appeal to young people who believe that some changes are desirable to make the world a better place to live. But its nature, or by its nature, conservative movements are defenders of established privilege and lean on the power of government for the protection of privilege. Right. You agree with that?
So
That's an interesting take, isn't it?
if that's the definition of conservatism,
You're not.
I'm not.
Exactly.
Right.
That's my point.
Right. The fact of the matter is, you know, the conservatism sounds like, from Hayek's perspective, really focuses on the status quo. So, in other words, the status quo is what we want to keep. We want to maintain it and protect our privilege and all that kind of stuff. You know, the John Kerry kind. So that would make John Kerry a conservative.
Well, let me ask you this.
'Cause
Is Donald Trump a conservative?
No.
Not by this definition.
No.
He wants to blow the system up.
Right.
If anything, he's a liberal.
Right. So that gets back to the whole notion of being, what's the term that they've been using for him, is disruptor.
Yes.
He's a disruptor.
Exactly.
And I fancy myself something of a disruptor. I think we need to, you know, you need to a certain extent, blow up the system a little bit so that you can, you know, design it for the circumstances we face today.
But he and I, and possibly you, are nationalists. We're populists. We may be even paternalistic in a sense, right?
So yeah,
maybe.
right. And you know, look, so we're talking about a fiscal conservative, or let me. No, Hayek was a capitalist, right? I think that's probably a good way to describe him.
That's the
right?
key.
So he was a capitalist describing a conservative the way he did in 1940. The fact is, and we already spoke about this, politicians co-opt words and twist them around, and you know, so that when they're actually describing it, it's very different than the definition that Hayek
This is
gave.
why I want to go over this exercise for the folks out there, because what has happened is that too often we hear people saying things and doing stuff, and this is why it's relevant to Lynn.
Oh, you're a conservative, so it doesn't matter. That type of thinking.
And you're looked at as if you have horns in the tail.
Right.
You know, when the real devil happens to be the ones that want a planned society. Now let me get to privilege, because this is fascinating. Privilege, if we can put that up, privilege, and here's the definition of privilege. It's the state granting, the state meaning government, federal government, granting and protecting rights of some which are not available on equal terms to others. Do you accept that definition, Paul?
Sure, yeah.
Okay. Now liberalism, the essence of liberalism is the denial of all privilege.
Right. So that means John Kerry can't be a liberal.
No, he's not a liberal.
Right, because
Neither is Bernie Sanders, neither is Elizabeth Warren.
John Kerry is at the front of the line for privilege.
Exactly.
What about me? Hey, get rid of that fire hydrant. Remember that? Remember the guy?
Oh, sure.
In front of his house?
They're all about privilege.
Yeah, it's all about privilege.
Yeah. And so what has happened is, and we're going to get to this, what has happened is the folks are starting to recognize that.
Right.
Particularly the rebellion that's taking place with, how do you pronounce his name? West?
Kanye West. So yes, and the Me Too movement too, if you think about it, right? All of these people that are getting whacked for the Me Too are the ones that are telling you and me about white privilege and how we are, and we need to, you know, be remorseful about our white privilege. And these are the same people that are running around and demanding their own privilege.
What happens to liberty then? What happens to the liberty when that happens? What happens when one group tries to suppress another group? That's exactly what happens in totalitarian states. So let's get to central planning, Paul. It's one of my favorites.
Yeah.
Plans. If we can put that up there, I got a plan. No, got a plan? The universal panacea. Here's a plan. Everybody's favorite
Utopia.
remedy, right?
Utopia.
Yeah, everybody's favorite remedy for all the ill of the world is what?
The plan.
The plan. Theoretically, plans sound good. In practice, citizens must be ready to accept severe constraints on their personal liberties to abide by the plan. And you know what we do now? We call them master plans.
Right.
We elevate them.
Right.
So they're more constrictive. So we're going to go to a break shortly. So tell me, what do you think about that?
So, you know, I've never been one who believed in the plan, you know, the social engineering and that type of stuff.
Yeah.
I mean, what we do at GLIS, we're trying to change people's thinking and attitudes about certain things, mainly how they take care of themselves. But we're not dictating what they do. What we're doing is encouraging them to move in that direction. We're making it fun, we're making it optional, and we're making it a situation where, you know, the hope is that they will take advantage of it, and then it'll go forward, and then that will become the way it is, as opposed to, you know, making a rule, setting it down, and then being outraged if you don't follow the rules.
So you're telling me you'd focus on the individual, which is the anathema to the socialists. The individual is, they don't like that. We have to take a quick break. We'll be back shortly. Stay tuned. We're liberal here and conservative.
I like this. This is a good conversation.
I was 18 years old. I had it made. Until I went to a college party, and I thought I was immune to temptation. That's when reality struck. Quite literally. If you choose to slowly end your liver, don't let it be your life that ends early. Be responsible.
You've always protected me. Every day of my life.
There you go.
Thanks, Dad.
I'm older now, but I still need you. Prescription pain pills, heroin, I know kids are getting addicted, and people are dying. Can you still protect me?
You can protect your teen. Teens who talk to their parents about opioids are less likely to misuse them. Find out what you can say.
Controlling and isolation, physical, emotional, and sexual abuse, threats, and blaming are all types of domestic violence. Boys who witness domestic violence are 3 times likely to become a batterer. 1 in 3 women experience domestic violence. 26% of teenagers reported 2 to 4 million women are battered each year. If you or someone you know is experiencing domestic violence, call 800-799-7233 or go to thehotline.org.
And we're back. Socialism. Put that up if you would. Socialism. Socialism is planned societies destroy liberty. This is why, Paul. Take a look. Tell what it says there. What do they do?
So,
They tell you what?
what to produce, how to produce it, and for whom to produce it.
Yeah. So it's completely determined
They
and controlled
control
by...
the means of production, and all that leads to is a society where...
Any choice? Is there any choice in that
and you
society?
and nobody has anything.
So is universal health care a good idea?
I started reading 1984, the book, over the weekend,
Yeah.
or actually while I was away, and it just marveled it. Just in the first couple of pages, it talks about how guy can't even find razor blades, right, to shave, and a guy's trying to bum razor blades off him in the hall while he's going to his apartment. He goes in and it's a dump, and then he looks at the wall and there's a beautiful picture of the Big Brother, and then you look at the TV and the TV goes into propaganda and talks about how great things are in society. Because,
But no razor blades.
but no nothing. I mean, they're living in squalor.
So on that point,
And that's
at that
Venezuela's
point,
the same
how
thing.
is universal health care a good thing? It isn't. It's no choice. That means
right.
bad product at high price.
Right.
Which is exactly what happened, folks.
And let me tell you
in
something.
Britain,
The
Go ahead.
privileged are not going to have to worry about
We
that.
talked about that. The privilege, they
They're outside
purposely
the system.
create this. In Britain, recently,
Alfie.
Alfie, the old boy who the Polish government and the Italian government were more than happy to try to treat, they wouldn't allow it to happen. Because that would show that they were incompetent.
Right.
Because he wasn't supposed to live off of a ventilator. He did.
Right.
Okay? That's what you're going to run into, folks. You're going to run into rationing, and you're going to run into bad health care. Don't buy into this Obamacare, Affordable Care Act stuff. That is jargon, Paul.
Right. It's a very different thing. The whole Affordable Care Act was trying to figure out how to insure people.
It's not good health. Bernie Sanders, listen to this, folks. Bernie Sanders is proposing that the federal government guarantees all Americans a job and health care. According to Rasmussen poll, 46% of voters like the idea. Do you out there like that idea?
So can I speak to that? Because when I heard this, I started laughing, because that's more of Republican/conservative idea. If you just, all you have to do is just change a little bit about how it is, right? And it becomes a conservative idea. He wants to guarantee people $15 an hour for a job, right? I would argue that if you are able to work, instead of you being on some type of entitlement program, that you are required to work, and we'll pay you $15 an hour.
He's saying that the government is going to guarantee you a job.
Right.
But that means that you're going to have wage and price controls, and everybody's going to be a drone. That's what it is, Paul.
But
there's no separation.
I get that. But if you would, if Lindsey Graham came up to you and said, "I want to do the exact same thing," the only difference is the way he described it is he says, instead of "I want to guarantee everybody a job," I want anybody who's able to work to actually work. And if you're on the dole, if you are somehow reliant on government for something, we're going to convert that to productivity. So you're going to actually be productive, and we will pay you to be productive. That's how you will get the money.
But here's what happened.
Because it's kind of the same
This
thing.
actually comes out of World War II and the Beveridge Report, which happened when the British Labour Party took over right after World War II in Britain. Okay? So they abandoned socialism, and they picked up the welfare state. That was a substitute for socialism.
Okay.
And here's what happened there, Paul. They said that government has an obligation to take care, to support anybody who can't work. However,
That's different than anybody who isn't working, though.
wait a second, Paul. Here's the catch to this. Sounds good, doesn't it? Here's the catch. You have to forfeit your citizenship, number one, can't vote. And number two, you can't have children. In other words, they sterilize you. All right, got that? So nobody really looks behind the curtain into what these actual programs mean.
Well, I wouldn't be quick to tell people that, that we'll give you $15 an hour, but you must do this, that, or the other thing, like give up your sterilization or
But that's what they were talking about,
Right.
Paul.
But it's interesting when you think about it because, I've heard this said 100 different ways, but it always is the same thing. They say that as you're growing up, a good plan for an individual is to get educated, get employed, get married, have kids, in that order, right?
Something like that, yeah. That's a guarantee for success.
Right, it's a guarantee for success if you get educated, get employed, get married, have
Actually, it
kids.
starts with get a job, get an education, don't have kids until you get married.
Right. Yeah, okay.
That's basically the same thing,
It's kind
right.
of the same thing. My point is that when people vary from that, that's when we run into problems. And we talked
Well,
a
what do
couple
you
of
do? What do you do when the vast majority of people what do you do when you have 46% of Americans who are saying, "I want to be coddled by the federal government"? Someone has to pay for it. Without the creation of wealth, you can't do any of it.
Right.
Okay, and that's what falls apart. Margaret Thatcher. It's all wonderful. Socialism is wonderful until you run out of people's money.
Right.
Wrong. I'm going to say wrong. Why Bernie Sanders and the Democrats are wrong for America? First of all, they love socialism, planned societies, which in effect destroy liberty. Democratic socialism is a precarious and unstable affair, in that economic planning inevitably will produce unintended consequences. The welfare state, which largely replaced socialism, is a hodgepodge of ill-assembled and inconsistent ideals whose goal is incompatible with the preservation of free society. Social experimentation can lead us into situations that none of us want. That's the danger.
Right.
Now, I'm going to go to the key to this. Here's the cat out of the bag. Let's get that up there. The cat is out of the bag. Hillary Clinton muses, and this happened, being a capitalist hurt her because so many Democrats are socialists. This was in the Des Moines Register poll at the time of the 2016 primary, found that 43% of Iowa Democrats were self-described socialists. So the Democrats are, in effect, most of them, what are they? Socialists.
a
So
plurality,
and what does socialism lead to? Totalitarianism. It's inevitable. It's a process. If you folks like that, that's 1984, Paul.
Right.
That's Brave New World.
Right. It's funny because, we were talking about what the definition of these words are in the beginning of the show: socialism, fascism, conservative, liberal, all that kind of stuff. People don't fully understand what socialism is. I've had a conversation actually with my brother who basically, we're already socialism. We're already, and I said, well, why do you say that? He says, we have Social Security, and you know that's the wrong description of having a safety net. Is not socialism. It is a path towards socialism, maybe, but socialism, as you've described to me on a number of occasions, is where the government nationalizes all the levers of production, right?
Let's take a look at those countries that have been socialized or communized. Soviet Union, Cuba, right? Venezuela, and you tell me how they're doing.
Right.
Is that the society that we want here?
Right.
And by the way, do not throw Sweden into that mix. They're social, but they're a hybrid. They have market forces, which may ultimately disintegrate. That's what Hyatt was warning against. He was saying the road to serfdom, the road for us becoming cogs in a machine of the state, he's warning against it. You can change it if you're aware of it. In other words, Social Security is fine if it's not taken to the extreme.
Right.
Subsidizing people who can't take care of themselves is fine. That's humane. Nobody has a problem. But not to the point where it becomes a way of life.
Right. And just to give you an example of, and it's not just Social Security that comes into play here. I'll give you an example. So I have to go into, I have a meeting in Boston at Ashburton Place every month. And recently they changed the rules about going in. There used to be before I would have to take off my coat and all my anything metal, because I go through a metal detector, right? They've changed it now. Now you got to get into a queue. You have to give them your driver's license. You have to take everything out of your pocket, including your belt and your coat and all that kind of stuff. So you have to take off more stuff, and you have to show them your ID, and they give you a badge, and then you go through the metal detector. So while I'm waiting, and it's something that used to take 30 seconds, now takes 5 minutes, right? So I'm talking to the guy. I said, so why'd you guys do this? And you know what his answer was? It drove me crazy, because his answer was, well, that's what they told us to do. From the DCAMs just told us to do it, so that's what we do. Yeah. And I said, do you like this? He says, I love it. And I said, how come? He says, because now I have a job.
Okay. So create a job. Let me ask you
my
this.
point is that the driving influence, that's a socialist kind of attitude, don't you think?
Of course it is, Paul. But here's the worst part of it. The worst part of it, everything you described, it would be fine if it was effective. But what they found is 95% they don't stop anything.
Right.
With all the TSA, nothing. Excuse me, every time they put to the test, they fail. Big time.
And I asked 3 different people if they could explain to me why they went to this more aggressive search procedure.
And what is the reason for it, Paul?
And the only thing they could come up with was because that's what somebody told us to do on the 13th floor.
That's called the mandate, Paul. I hear this from local politicians, folks. Here's the city of Lynn. Oh, we have to do it. It was mandated. It's, right. Oh, we have to spend $150 million on a sewer storm drain separation in West Lynn. Oh, because they told us to do it. But don't do it. What are they going to do if you don't do it, Paul? They're gonna sue the city? Is that what they're going to do? I don't know. We got a minute till break. And when we get back from break, we're going to talk about things that matter, or things to think about, Paul, and you have to get your thinking hat on. Our number here is 781-780-9460. We'll be back in a flash.
Every 40 seconds in the United States, a child goes missing. About 74% of victims of non-family child abductions are girls.
Only about 1 child out of 10,000 missing children reported to the local police is not found alive. 1 in 5 children 10 to 17 years old receive unwanted sexual solicitations online. 350 million people worldwide suffer from depression.
While this may come as a shock, what many people don't seem to realize is that depression comes in various forms and is experienced differently in everyone. There is one death by suicide every 12.3 minutes, and 2 out of 3 people with depression do not actively seek nor receive proper treatment. So let's change that. You are not alone. Seek help today.
And we're back in a flash. And speaking of Flash, Paul.
Flash Gordon.
Yeah, when?
May 11th, I think, right? A week from tomorrow?
In studio?
So May 11th, Friday, May 11th, right here at 7
right here.
o'clock.
By
They're
the
going
way,
to be showing Flash
get here
Gordon.
about 6:30.
Get at 6:30?
You get refreshments.
Yep.
You know who paid me?
Who?
It's all free, by the way.
It's all free. That's what I thought you meant. Yeah.
Well, it isn't free. It's courtesy of
Lynn Community Television.
Yeah, it's a neighborly thing, right?
Yep.
And we're a neighborly station.
Come on down.
But I love Ming. Ming in it is Von. You think I forgot his name? The Swedish actor.
But are you talking about Ming from the serial Flash Gordon?
No, this isn't serial. This is Sam Jones.
Right.
Playing, and that was it. He did Flash Gordon. That was the end of it. You know, the Birdmen. You know, and all that type of stuff. Things to think about, folks. Let's get that up there, and then we'll move forward. Here's 3 classics. This is Karl Marx. You see that guy there? Karl Marx, the first guy. He said the first requisite of happiness of the people is to abolish religion. You like that one? The theory of communism may be summed up in one sentence. What is it, Paul?
Abolish all private property.
You folks like that idea? No private property, you own nothing? That's the essence of communism, socialism, and planned society.
I like the last one. Can you go back to that? The third one is even better.
Oh, well, let's get to what Adolf Hitler had to say.
So wait a minute. So for the bureaucrat, the world is a mere object to be manipulated by him.
Very good.
And that's how bureaucrats operate.
It's happening right now, Paul.
All they
The
do is-
bureaucrats are manipulated to try to tattoo Donald Trump.
Right.
Because the bureaucrats don't like the idea. They want them to be accountable.
Right.
And they haven't been transparent. If you want to talk about our civil liberties were so jeopardized with the previous administration and what they did, what that FBI and the intel community did, the IRS and Department of Justice, Paul, it was unbelievable. And can you imagine if she had won?
Oh, we wouldn't have heard a word about this.
Well, what would happen to our civil liberties?
Gone.
Right? At least.
It was over.
Exactly. We're on the fast track to that controlled,
right,
managed society
and
nobody wants.
And everybody that watches MSNBC and CNN would continue to believe that everything's just going along swimmingly.
Oh, please. Hitler said, to conquer a nation, what's the first thing you do? You disarm the citizens. Get rid of the Second Amendment. You see, here is what Hyatt was screaming about. He said the key to everything is the rule of law. When you violate the rule of law, and they do that in the guise of social justice. So they want to alter our Constitution. Don't forget that. They want to get rid of the Second Amendment. They want to have political correctness, so you can't say, well, don't have freedom of speech in this country anymore. Forget religion. They've already tattooed religion, right? And they're violating all the tenets of the Constitution in order, as they say, to provide for social justice.
Right.
That's the first step toward
right. And
tyranny.
By the way, so is letting Hillary Clinton and all of those bureaucrats off the hook, is that social justice? Because they do have a separate set of rules for them, right?
No question about that.
So that's social justice for them too.
But who reinforces it?
That's actually privilege.
Yes. And the media is in the pocket.
Yep.
The media sends
They're
wrong
privileged
narrative. So Hitler said this, folks. He said the best way to take control over people and control them utterly is to take a little freedom at a time. Not all at once, a little at a time. To erode rights by 1,000 tiny, almost imperceptible reductions, which is exactly what's been happening.
The inevitability of gradualism.
That's right. Very good. In this way, the people will not see their rights, or these rights of freedom, being removed until past the point at which these changes cannot be reversed. And that's the question I ask you. Are we at the brink?
Right. The Affordable Care Act is a classic example. They lied about it to
Right.
get people to support it, and then they put in all of these things.
Caveats, and you can't get rid of it.
No, they put it in the beginning. They made it all attractive so everybody would want it, until it was so far down the line that even the Republicans who insisted on repealing it can't figure out how to repeal it because now they'll blow up a system that's too deep. So that's exactly his point.
Well, here's the guy that educated both Hillary Clinton and Barack Obama.
Saul Alinsky.
Hey, very good, Paul.
Yeah.
Rules for radicals. He's from Chicago. He said, here's what you do. Listen to this, folks. This is happening as we speak. Polarize the target, isolate it, and pin it down as if your cause is 100% right and just. The enemy is 100% wrong and evil. Let nothing let you off your target. The object is to destroy, not to convince. So isn't that precisely what's happening with this investigation?
Of course, yeah. So let me, and we talked about this yesterday when we were preparing for the show. So when they
Wait a minute, we got a caller. Let's
we
get
do?
to the call. Caller, how are you? Welcome to Frankly Speaking. Go ahead. If you haven't had the chance to meet Assistant Superintendent Dr.
Tutwiler, I encourage you
to do so.
He's a finalist.
Well, that would be great, Paul. And if he's, listen, we're open. If he'd like to come on our show, we'd be more than happy to have him and the other two on.
And it's from Paul's comments, he's actually a Lynn guy.
Yeah.
So they actually do have one Lynn candidate. That's good.
But an invitation to any of the candidates, if they'd like to come on, we'd be more than happy to give them their time. And next Thursday, they could turn around and you folks could drill them. We're doing a little exercise on sociology, politics, and trying to get some reality out there. You know, one of the genesis of all this is if you talk to people like Tim Fenton and Ralph Briggs, who watch the show and comment, and Malcolm Mitchell, these are folks that were absolutely Democratic Party, the same as you and I were growing up. That was a party that was really interested in taking care of little people and social justice in the right sense of the word.
Right.
Okay? And they've been isolated. They've been called deplorable. Their ideas no longer have currency as they used to have them because, you know, they've moved on to a different place. So I'm saying to you that these labels that we use today are alien, are foreign to me.
Right.
And I wish you folks out there would take the time. And you're being buffaloed. You know, when you have someone like Elizabeth Warren out there and she says, you didn't build it, what's she talking about? You know, she says that there's no free enterprise out there, Paul.
Right.
She says capitalism is evil. It's not evil. It needs to be harnessed, but it's not evil. It's a lot better than socialism.
And it's created the most powerful country in the world, the richest country in the world, too.
And the most advanced nations in the world.
Right.
Why is it that communist China adopted capitalism? Huh? Jeff, think about that for. Why is it that Japan became capitalistic? And if you take a look at South Korea as opposed to North Korea, capitalistic.
Yeah, I know, that's
Singapore.
like the old East and West Berlin, right? Same thing.
Same difference.
Yep.
Very good, Paul. And every place where you have had the old Soviet model, controlled economies, 5-year plans, and the rest of that type of stuff, they don't work.
Right.
Free enterprise works.
And Bernie Sanders, Hillary Clinton, and all of the deep state, that's what they're angling for. That's what they want.
You ask,
But they won't have to. They won't have to live by the tenets of socialism because they'll be in their gated community, privileged beyond belief, and it won't matter to them. It's just, but they keep trying to buffalo us. And
you
people
tell
don't
me
understand
how
that.
many folks who are journalists today, be they print journalists or, you know, on TV, how many of them do you think understand philosophy and political science?
Only the ones that started out in political science.
But they're wedded to the actually the socialistic communistic state. They're wedded to that. I mentioned to you folks before, scientists absolutely love big government. Love it because they give them the money to fund their projects.
Right. Right. And that's why you have, what they say, 98% of scientists agree that that global warming is man-made.
Of course, because they get funded by the government.
And if they don't go along with the party line, they won't get a nickel.
They're out of a job.
Not only will they won't get a nickel, they'll be castigated by their colleagues.
The same thing you said about your experience on the TSA is precisely the same thing by extrapolation. Those who are looking to have oats, you know, like horses get, are getting fed. They don't care. All they care about, it's like my dog. My dog loves me as long as I feed him.
Right. No, I know. Well, you know, and it's really rather, to me, it's rather sad when somebody says that the only thing that motivates them is what it means to them and only them. They'll never look at the bigger picture. And while I know we need to be we need to have self-interest, that's part of our protection that keeps us alive by being self-interested. But when you are selfish beyond understanding what's going on around you, you essentially undermine your own efforts.
Paul, if you have total liberty, you have chaos, which in its own is as bad as being constricted, okay? Right. So you can't have a society that's totally libertarian.
Right.
Because
it's the Wild West.
Right. And there's no containment, there's no dimension to it. It has no form. Similarly, if you constrict everything to the point in which individuality is stifled, you're not going to create wealth. What's beautiful about our system, capitalism, is that you can be born poor and you don't have to remain there.
Right.
You can be born rich and there's no guarantee you're going to stay there.
Right.
It's flexible, it's fluid. It's not a caste system.
Right, except for, you know, this business of the privilege and the people that rely on privilege, you know, the rent seekers who are only interested in changing the rules so that they can financially benefit, not because they're best for society or best for anything. It's only because it's best for them.
Was Obama opposed to or in favor of a wall?
Around his house, he was in favor of it.
Very good, Paul. But he was certainly opposed to a wall that would protect Americans, right?
Yep.
On the southern border.
Absolutely opposed to it.
But when it came to his own house, his own neighborhood, different issue.
Right.
See, this is what gets me, folks. These folks are so hypocritical, it's incredible. And they wonder why people become disillusioned. And by the way, that's by design. They allow these young kids coming out of schools of journalism, they're completely indoctrinated into a mindset about how wonderful government is.
Well, that's the thing that really bothers me about the way society is today. The kids that are going to colleges, they believe in this stuff only because that's all they know. That's all they're being taught.
That's right. Paul, here's another thing that's interesting. It's how war economies erode liberties, because during war, they ration.
Right.
During war, government controls industry for the purpose of war. We've been at war now all my life. You know, if they don't break things and blow things up like they do for the last 15 or 20 years in the Middle East, there are a lot of factories and there's a lot of industry that wouldn't be making any money.
See, I've always believed that, you know, it's kind of the neocon thinking, I suppose, but I've always believed that you know, what did Eisenhower call it, the military-industrial complex? You know, they build all these great blow-up contraptions, and they got to go blow them up somewhere so they can sell some more.
And rebuild.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So
that's
when you have
part of capitalism.
When you have somebody that says, a president comes along and he says, I'm not going to nation build anymore. I don't understand why we spent $5 to $7 trillion in the Middle East. That was a big waste of money.
Right.
Well, that makes the deep state go bonkers.
You know, I had always thought this, but I'd never heard a politician ever say it. And then Donald Trump says, how come we go in 1991 to save Kuwait, right? And it's on our dime.
On our dime.
We do it, it's on our dime.
$7 trillion later.
Right. They get their gold back, they get their oil fields back.
Everything.
And we have all people get hurt and injured and
no legs, no arms.
Right. You know, I mean, I'm not saying that we should be mercenaries, but I think that there should be some. I can see, you know, if we're going to be doing these things for people, they need to be willing to reciprocate some way.
Don't you? I love that word, All I've been hearing is reciprocal, reciprocal, reciprocal coming from Donald Trump. You folks, remember reciprocal. Reciprocal is a great word. Great word, right?
It's just about making it fair.
It's a two-way street, huh?
Yep, yep.
We have to take a one-way break.
One-way
We'll be back for our last segment.
That makes it two-way.
Yeah, with the Flash.
49 million Americans struggle to put food on the table. More than 1 in 5 children are at risk of hunger. Among African Americans and Latinos, it's 1 in 3.
40% of food is thrown out in the U.S. every year, or about $165 billion worth. All of this uneaten food could feed 25 million Americans. If you or someone you know is struggling with hunger, please visit My Brother's Table at 98 Willow Street.
The Haven Project was created to fill a gap in services for homeless young adults in the city of Lynn and surrounding areas, a population that had previously been underserved. One of the many services we provide is job training, and we had this idea. To improve our job training program, we decided to do training in our very own specialty coffee shop. In our experience, we have found that most clients do not have the foundational skills needed to keep a job. Through this social enterprise and with a job training coach, we can address this. This cafe will provide operating funds for all of our programs. This has been part of our strategic plan since our inception, and we are thrilled to see this dream come to fruition.
And some reminders. There'll be interviews, Paul, next Monday and next Tuesday. They'll be done live broadcast on LVTV.
So before can you just explain to me what that means? So is the search committee is going to ask questions of the candidates in public, basically?
I have no idea, Paul. I honestly don't know.
Or is this going to be questions from the audience type of thing?
I have no idea. It simply says the interviews for position of superintendent of Lynn Public Schools will be broadcast live. I'm assuming that the school committee will be doing it, won't they? Yeah, school committee. They'll be interviewing them, and that'll be that. So I believe that's what it is. It's like a special school committee meeting on Monday and on
So it's really
Tuesday.
So it's not
at 6.
So that's a little different. I guess I want to go. I don't want to go on record as being opposed to the idea. But if the school committee is just having essentially a special meeting and they hope to ask questions of the candidates,
I think that's what it is, Paul.
that's a little different than interviewing, because I think the interview process is a little bit more, I think, intimate, and it requires one-on-one, I think.
Okay.
And it's not. I don't
But
think
that is Monday and Tuesday at 6. And then on Tuesday, right afterwards, at 8 o'clock, we're going directly to the city council meeting. Do you have any idea what they're going to be talking about this week? The city council? You don't know what's on the agenda. We'll find out.
Waterfront master plan.
Is it really?
They're
A
gonna
master
they're
plan?
going to new
No,
one.
it's the master plan. Pretty soon they'll have, it's like being on steroids, right? And the 3 finalists, Dr. Jessica Huzanga, I think I said it right, I hope I did, and Dr. Maurice Vincent and Dr. Patrick Tutwheeler, is that how you say it?
Yeah, that was the one that.
That Paul called up about.
Right.
All right. By the way, Harry Gannis is going to Boston Red Sox. It's Greek Heritage Night, and that's going to be Wednesday, June 27th. We'll tell you more about it. 7:10 p.m. The Angels play against the Red Sox, and they have these hats written in Greek. I guess it must be Boston Red Sox. So, and a lot of this goes, the proceeds, which said net proceeds will benefit the Metropolitan Boston Camp, hosted by Alpha Mega Council, whatever that means. The Golden Greek VIP tickets are $300 a clip. That means I'm not going to be in that club. Other seats are $40 to $20 per ticket. And the deadline, by the way, to order up for this is May 31st. We'll try to keep you reminded.
And where do you go to get the tickets?
I'll ask Estelle the next time I see her. And by the way, as you mentioned, Paul, Flash Gordon is happening when? A week from
May
Friday.
11th.
And then a great picture that everybody should see, and it was one of the best pictures of the year, on May 25th at 8 o'clock at the Lynn Auditorium, they're going to have the darkest hour. You know, that was a great picture, and that's right up our alley. Now, here's an example, folks. Winston Churchill, the hero of World War II, right? He was conservative, considered conservative, right? What happened as soon as the war was over?
They kicked him out.
They kicked him out, put the Labor Party in. The same party that wanted to do central planning and the rest of it. So thank you very much. That's how much, you know, true commentary. Now, there's two things that Tim Fenton wrote that I find to be right on target. One of them is, and he says this categorically, Paul, no ifs, what's about it, put them in the slammer. Anybody who distributes heroin, cocaine, or any of that stuff should categorically be considered a crime against humanity.
It really is.
It is.
Yeah.
He's simplified it right to the point.
Right.
No jargon, to the point. And then he says, put them in military prisons if you have to. And he says, if you're going to have a war on drugs, let's have a war.
Right.
Let's fight it.
Yeah, let's one that's worth winning instead of everything being what is it Obama did. It's rules of engagement. You know, you got to fight with one hand tied behind your back or whatever. You know, rules of engagement for fools, frankly. If we're in war, you're in war.
So I think Tim's on target. And he also said something that's fascinating. I'd like you to speak to this. Folks, our number here is 781-780-9460. And Tim says this. He says, the number one gateway drugs, talking about that which gets you addicted. Want to hear?
Yeah.
Caffeine and sugar. That's something to think about, Paul. They are addictive.
Well, no, I think you're right.
He's got a point there, doesn't he?
You know, it's funny because, you know, I often say that I have a, quote, addictive personality. I think you've said the same thing.
Oh, God.
You know, and I think that, you know, just the way that humans are wired, you can tend towards addiction in a lot of different ways. I mean, I said this last week, you know, recovering alcoholic, don't drink, but I find other things to focus my attention on. So
yeah. I noticed you've been on with that cigar again. Scars coming back into your life?
Yes, the addiction doesn't go away. Just what you're addicted to changes. You know,
That's true.
A substitute.
Ralph talks about, he takes a lot of walks. He walks around the city, and that's a good thing. But in the area that he walks, apparently the meth clinic is right across the street over on the other side of the Linway. And what he suggests, and what he's saying is that he sees these kids all the time, and they're all juiced up and high as a kite. Is that accurate? Most of them don't have jobs. But this is what he laments. And, you know, and I find this, it irritates me too, is when I go into certain places, someone always panhandling, invariably they have iPhones or a smartphone.
Hey, did I ever tell you about the time that so I'm going into Boston. I used to work in Boston many years ago. This was back in the early 90s. And so come up State Street. My office was right near the State Street station, the Blue Line State Street. And every day there was this guy who was sitting on a milk crate, and he would have, you know, a skull cap, and he would just hold it out, and he would put his head down, and he just look pathetic. Didn't say a word, just stay there all day. So I used to see him on and on and on every day, and I never did anything about it. And one day, I'm going to work, pulling into the Wonderland station, and there's a brand new Buick right in front of me, right? Pulls in, he goes up, I pay my thing, I go in and I pull up, and I end up pulling up right next to him. I get out of the car and I start walking to the train station, and turns out it's the guy. He's got a brand new car, he's got a T-Pass. I mean, it was a business for him. I mean, he had it all figured out, and he just sat there with his head down and he made a boatload
No
of
heavy
money.
lifting either.
Yeah, no.
We have a few minutes left. I want to get to Malcolm Mitchell because Malcolm says some really profound things also. Plain and simple, he's sick and tired of government coming up with all these new programs, new labels. He simply says, we have a drug problem. Accept it. By the way, all these questions, apparently drugs is something that the city, we'll get more to it because this all has to do with response to what we did on the opioid thing last week, as a matter of fact. And he agrees with me, or I agree with him, or vice versa, that legalizing recreational pot is an invitation for addiction. It's a bad idea, and I agree with him. You know, you can only, it's only going to make things worse. And Malcolm, I can't agree with you more on that one. And he goes down and he talks about journey to seeking better high and trying the hardcore drugs such as meth, cocaine, heroin, crack. And he got an education on this because he was on a grand jury that had to deal with drugs. You know, you gotta face realities. You can't do this, oh, we don't want to stigmatize routine. I can't buy into that. We have to be, and Tim's right, Malcolm's right, and Briggsy's right. If
But
you
just
wanna,
like you were saying earlier about another topic, you know, conservatism and liberalism.
Yeah.
There are limits. You have to place limits on the upper and the lower end of these things. You know,
at
you
some
can't-
point, you've got to lay the lumber.
Right.
Yeah.
But it needs to be at both ends. To do
Paul-
it all one way or another, it just doesn't work.
Paul, as usual, it's been entertaining.
Yep.
We're at that Flash Gordon hour. And you, by the way, will take on the Emperor Ming. And we will come back next week. Are you going to be with us next week, Paul, I hope?
Yeah, I'm
you're not-
done traveling for a while, I think, thankfully.
The prodigal son will be here.
Prodigal son returns.
The voice of reason, Paul Crowley, Esquire, and Joe Spina, otherwise. We'll see you next week, same time, same station. Have a great week.